Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my weekly compendium of case reports between the 7th to the 12th of April, 2021. Case files number 100 to 105. Case file number 100, written by Claustrophobia. A death, a service, and a recipe for relish. Grandpa's parting gift. This happened in December 2020. Backstory. On December 11th, 2004, my grandfather passed away. I was 13. Almost immediately, the 3 sons and 3 daughters tore the family in two and continued to feud. In February 2011, my grandmother passed away while I was deployed overseas. I was 20. The 3 sisters sold off the house and hoarded the family recipes and heirlooms. I only wanted one thing. I wanted my grandfather's dog tags. Being the only grandchild to serve in the military, it was something that meant a lot to me. Sadly, I was told that I would not appreciate them and was essentially dismissed, so I never asked for anything else. After I was honorably discharged from the United States Marine Corps, I pursued a career as a chef. Over time, I started to really want to recover certain family recipes. I had cut ties with the family because I wasn't going to pick sides, and I either wanted the family to be together or I didn't want to be a part of it. I haven't been in contact in years. My last contact was in August 2013, when barely any of the family attended my wedding. The story. The first week of December, I was talking with my brother. I only keep contact with him and my father. My brother mentioned how awesome it would have been to have the recipe for my grandparents' zucchini relish. They made it fresh with ingredients from the garden, jarred it, and it was a big hit with the family. A few days later, I was writing a letter to accompany some recipes that I was sending to a friend for Christmas. I wrote the letter while I was taking a ferry ride to an island I was to work at that day. When I finished the letter, I tucked it in a pouch that I never used in my backpack. The pouch is basically where your back meets the pack. It's open at the top and it's quite narrow. The letter remained there until the end of the week. Friday, December 11th, 2020. I returned home after work and immediately reached into that small, narrow pouch while focused on getting my house keys ready. I pull out a piece of weathered paper, confused as this isn't a letter. I am now focused on this paper while thinking to myself, what the hell? The paper is weathered, written in a blue ink, which reminded me of the cheap blue pens my grandfather kept around the house, and the handwriting is vaguely familiar. I proceeded to read and a chill goes right up my spine. It's the zucchini relish recipe that my brother and I had talked about days prior. I immediately message him, and he tells me to look at the date. It is 12/11. In other words, it's the anniversary of my grandfather's death, and one of my grandparents' recipes spontaneously appears in an unlikely place, an impossible place. I audibly thanked my grandfather as I walked into my house with the recipe in hand. Even more eerie is the fact that my brother has told me that the 3 daughters do not have possession of this recipe, and yet here it is in my possession. It's one thing to discuss something, and social media shows ads for that exact thing. It's another thing to discuss something personal and have it spontaneously appear in an unlikely place by extraordinary means. Case notes, file number 100. Thank you for sharing this story with us, and thank you for your service. I'm reminded of a past story I read where it was a little girl that appeared to them as a child, playing in a closet. Somehow, this ghost was able to conjure a pack of playing cards from nowhere. I wonder if your grandfather was able to do something similar, or if not conjure it, to transport it from another location where the recipe had already been written down and slotted into the pouch he knew you'd go looking for, but also that you never used before, so he knew you would know it's him. It's a small gesture, but one I imagine meant the absolute world to you. And now I want to know this recipe too. I've never had zucchini relish before. The author responded to my comment, saying, "You're absolutely right. It did mean the world to me. My eyes teared up once I realized what it was that I was holding. I'll be heading home soon and will upload the photo of the recipe. Instead of typing it up, I want to share the actual picture of the recipe to show how it appeared to me. It will do the story justice to show the proof. Case file number 101, written by Enzo Blois. The sun shining bright, eternally, and then it flickered. Hi everyone. I've never read anything about this sun flickering thing. Honestly, that's the best way I can put it. But I just found this subreddit and I wanted to understand more about this phenomenon. Is it real, a hallucination? I don't know. Have you ever noticed a sudden flicker in the light, as if you blinked so unconsciously that you caught yourself by surprise? Well, that's kind of what it feels like. When experiencing it alone, I always thought it was a sudden eye blink that I didn't see coming because I was so focused on whatever I was looking at. But there was one time where I wasn't the only one who experienced it. Me and some friends were having lunch together. The entire place was lit only by sunlight, when suddenly everything was void of light for a fraction of a second and went back to normal. My two friends looked at me, and one of them even screamed something like, "Oh my god, what the hell?" He looked confused, so I said, "No, I saw it too. The light just went off and back on," and they both agreed. We just moved on and pretended nothing happened, but it was very awkward. Years went by and I kept having similar experiences by myself, and never thought they were more than something only I saw. Something weird about me that I usually just ignored. They were rare enough. But this year, it happened again. I was with a friend in her living room, entirely lit by sunlight, and sunlight only. We were sitting on the floor painting some artwork when it happened. Honestly, I didn't pay much attention to it at first. Maybe I just got used to ignoring it. But I did see it. That was when she stopped and said, "Did you just see the whole room flicker to dark and back to light again?" She looked at me and I saw the confusion in her eyes. I said, "Yes," and told her about my experience years back with my friends at lunch. That's when my curiosity for this event grew. I know for some it may sound like a huge lie, but these are all facts and real events of my life. I'm here to share them and to know if there's anyone else out there that had a similar experience, or who has an explanation for this. Case notes, file number 101. When you were with your friend the second time in our living room, was it in the same town as when it happened the first time with your friend? I'm wondering if there's an environmental trigger involved. Most glitches seem to involve location as being a huge determining factor. Or when people deviate from their normal routines. It's as if the server is chugging to try to keep up with the unexpected choices, or environments. The author responded quickly, just saying that yes, both events happened in the same city. This is interesting, isn't it? So then yeah, it's just speculation, but I'd be really interested in knowing if this sun flicker happens in other locations. Is it tied to the person, the perception, or is it environmental? Case file number 102, written by Man on Road Throwaway. A night's drive and a slim man by the road. Creepy as hell. I was driving down a long, dark, secluded rural road at 11:30 p.m. and spotted an extremely tall, skinny, pale, around 7 foot tall, completely still man on the side of the road. When I drove along the entire road, he didn't move once and stayed completely frozen. When I first spotted him, I literally thought he was propped up like a mannequin due to his stillness. The closer I got, it looked like he was standing on top of a scooter-like transportation device, but didn't move at all. He looked as though he was wearing long pants and a long-sleeved t-shirt or jacket, despite the fact that it was an extremely hot night. It was unlike anything I've ever seen before. He looked so still and inhuman. He looked frozen. He looked like a mannequin. I can't even explain it. Someone else was in the car with me and saw the exact same thing, so I'm not crazy. Has anyone else seen a man or entity like this? Case notes, file number 102. Well, that gives off Slenderman vibes. I take it you weren't able to get a glimpse of his face if he had one. I wonder if these entities are perhaps related to aliens. Woohoo, back to aliens. It stands to reason though. There could be multiple species of aliens. Someone even left a comment on the channel saying that, perhaps as a theory, they are us from the future. And maybe others are actually extraterrestrials, the standard alien, just from another solar system. But either way, I wouldn't want to approach the slim man. Case file number 103. Written by user Rubens Mejia. A friend so pure, even death won't stop him from helping. I want to share this experience that happened to me around 15 years ago when I started to study in a town away from my parents' home. There was one man, let's call him Tony, who was a good friend of my father, helped him at work sometimes, hence, I hung out with them usually. When I was 17, I moved to a bigger city to start university, so I traveled every 2 months to visit my parents for long weekends or vacations. After my second year away, this friend Tony died from alcohol abuse. My father told me on a phone call how it happened, or at least how he had heard it had happened. Around 2 months later, on Dia de los Muertos, Day of Death, here in Mexico, I went to visit my parents, also to go visit the tombs of the family, as the tradition goes. And at this point, I literally forgot about Tony's death. The apparition came around because I didn't catch the bus that arrives during the day to my parents' hometown, so I was forced to take one that arrives there around 2 a.m. It's quite a small town, so since I couldn't find any taxi near the bus station, I decided to walk home. Around 5 blocks away from the house, I had to pass on a bridge where people say that a decapitated donkey spirit scares people during the night. I was a bit scared, to be honest. But then, suddenly, this friend, Tony, reached me on his bike. I didn't mention that he always moved around on a bike, and asked me if I was just arriving from university. Maybe because I was originally thinking about the decapitated donkey, I completely forgot about the fact that Tony was supposed to be dead. So I started to talk to him. We walked passing the bridge and a couple more blocks for around 4 or 5 minutes, talking about the school, the food on the other city, and stuff like that. Just 1 block away from my parents' house, he told me, "Okay, I have to go check some things out over there," pointing in another direction. "But keep safe, say hello to your father for me." We said goodbye, and then I got home. Since it was early morning, I walked directly into my room and waited for the next day to go see my parents. It was until next morning when I was just about to tell my father about Tony, when I remembered that he was supposed to be dead already. At that moment, I didn't tell my parents, but a bit later into the day, my father told me that he saw me arriving. He asked me if I was drunk or something, because he saw me talking to nobody, and then I told him. I think it was some kind of company on that bridge that I was afraid of, because of the stories, and also because of the donkey story. I didn't even pay attention to the fact that my company was someone I knew was already dead. It is kind of funny for me, and actually never felt afraid of that moment. Thank you to Tony, old friend, that was there with me, even in death. Case notes, file number 103. When someone dies, their echo left behind is an imprint of who they were inside. That's my theory anyways. Your friend Tony clearly was a protector. Whatever traumas he couldn't overcome himself, he knew that you were afraid and wanted to comfort you, to shield you from whatever horrors existed in that place. Either just as a myth swirling in your brain, or in reality. It's beautiful. No more needs to be said. But do let us know if Tony ever pops in for another visit. Case file number 104. Written by Trash0729. She witnessed an ordinary blind panel pop back into the world out of nowhere. Necessary info. I have a sliding glass door to my back deck, which is shaded with one of those sliding sets of blinds that are commonly found in motels, as far as I've seen them before. If you Google search sliding door hanging blinds, you should see exactly what I mean. They're panels that hang vertically and layer over top of each other to condense as you push them open. Occasionally, they pop out of their little sockets and fall off if tampered with. We have only lived here for about 5 months, but this took place maybe 2 months or so after moving into this house. My son is 2, and he's curious about anything that moves in a swinging motion, so he messes with these blinds a lot. On a couple occasions, he's accidentally knocked a panel or two down by trying to get them to swing back and forth. Like I said, they just pop out and fall down, and I always hang them back up immediately because I don't like the chaotic look of missing panels, obviously. Anyway, one day I noticed one of the panels was missing, so I looked around the immediate area to find it, not knowing when it had fallen off. Mind you, these are hard to miss because they're like 8 feet long, give or take, and probably a good 4 or 5 inches wide, but I didn't see it laying anywhere nearby. I shrugged it off and went about my day, thinking I'd just ask my partner if something had happened to it, whenever he woke up. Fast forward to that point in the day. I bring up the missing panel to my partner, and he says he noticed it was missing too, but didn't know where it had gone, nor did he see it happen. So I'm thinking, okay, it couldn't have gone far, and since neither of us had thrown it away, it had to be here in the house, presumably somewhere close by. Although the panels aren't heavy, they're long and would be awkward for a child to try to carry or drag, but I didn't rule the possibility out until I had looked everywhere and couldn't find it. Again, it would be hard to miss one of those panels laying around, so I'm stumped by this point. I go back to the door and slide the blinds open and close several times, trying to see if it had gotten caught somehow. As I'm doing this, my partner is observing the track that each clasp is attached to, finding that there was no way one of those panels could get jammed up into it, even with intentional force. I'm swinging the panels back and forth, inspecting each one, finding nothing unusual about any of the remaining panels. Just as I'm about to give up and call it lost, I slide the blinds closed one more time, the exact same way I had just done 4 or 5 times prior, leading up to this moment, and the panel appears out of nowhere, right in front of my eyes. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed, but the evidence was right there. The panel materialized directly in my line of sight, not in my peripheral vision or after I had turned around, but literally from the exact point my eyes were focused on. It appeared in what I can best describe as a visual pop, right side up and about 6 inches away from the actual track. This is the part that is kind of tricky to explain, but it was sort of curved towards me, like it had been a little bunched up, giving it enough momentum to fall into my direction, top end first. It didn't just fall like it had been hanging in the bunch, the way I'd seen them fall a handful of other times. It was more like the panel had been hanging higher than the others. I really hope that makes enough sense to give a mental image, but trying to put it into words the way it fell is what has held me back from creating this post. It was so unusual and unexpected that I didn't even have time to flinch. I just stood there gawking at the panel that had just respawned. My partner had been standing there the entire time, but of course he turned away when I said I had given up and went to slide the blinds closed. He didn't see it materialize, but he was definitely just as stunned to see it laying there on the floor, after we both checked thoroughly that there was nowhere for it to have gotten caught in the other panels. The only explanation we could come up with is that it got unclipped from its own clasp and somehow ended up clipping perfectly into another one behind another panel. But this isn't easy to do on purpose, let alone by accident. Another issue is that if sliding the blinds caused it to come loose, why wouldn't that have happened one of the first 5 times I slid the blinds open and closed? And lastly, I saw it appear from about 6 inches away from the track where it would have supposedly been attached, had that been the case, rather than seeing it pop out of a clasp. This is by far the most bizarre thing I've ever witnessed that has no paranormal aspects to it. I'm not so sure I believe in that realm, but I do believe in glitches. If I hadn't fully seen exactly what had happened, I'd probably brush it off, but even months later to this day, I'm 100% certain this panel had blipped out of existence and then right back before my eyes. Case notes, file number 104. Well, these disappearing glitches are right in my backyard. The only thing I've personally experienced too, though unlike for you, my object never returned. But what's going on here, I really do wonder. I've read quite a few glitches of individual people being out of phase with reality, but they're always kept gravitationally bound to the planet. I suppose it does stand to reason that inanimate items could be stuck in the same way that humans are, depending on what's causing the phenomena. Perhaps this is what is responsible for all of our missing items, or many of them. From socks to tennis balls, all the way to rematerializing distorted blind panels. Trippy. I do have some questions regarding the pop-in. Was there a sound involved? And also if the panel was the same as it was before, if you inspected it. There's small details, likely nothing, but I wonder if there are alterations to people or items that disappear and then reappear. Or do we come back exactly the same? Some food for thought. Case file number 105, written by Twirly Girl 313. A father undeserving of love, dangerous, now dead. Is that really the end though? Not long after my father died, my mother and I were sitting in our living room, discussing various things. This was at night, and we were recovering from my father's death. Now, to be clear, my father was not a nice person. He was a narcissist, an alcoholic, and an all-around miserable person to be around. He thought he was superior to everyone else, and the world owed him a living. We were able to finally get him into a VA nursing home towards the end of his life, as we could not care for him at home as he dried out and threatened us daily. While we were sitting there, quietly talking, we heard his dreadful tread coming down the stairs. Boom, boom, boom. It was definitely his tread or gait. We both froze and stared at each other. When he got to the bottom, the disturbance stopped. I had goose flesh like never before, and it was difficult to sleep that night without one eye open, as he always threatened to kill us in our sleep. While he was in the hospital, he would call my mother every single night and tell her the most vile ways in which he would kill her. Fortunately, he was paralyzed from the waist down at this point and could not make good on those threats. I saged our entire house the very next day, corner to corner, every square inch. Did I mention that my VCR would regularly turn itself on when he was in the hospital, even though it wasn't plugged in? I also had horrible, vivid dreams of his hand reaching out from under my bed to grab me. Case notes, file number 105. This is a quick story that turned my blood into a boil. The only positive takeaway from this is that it does appear that the spirits aren't able to interact with the living world to that great of an extent. Perhaps it takes a great deal of concentration or practice to be able to manipulate objects, so he wasn't able to hurt anyone because he was new to the experience. So while your dead abusive father is in your house, I think you can hold him at bay. That said, you should move out if at all possible. Or did you already, since your father passed away? The author quickly responded, saying, "No, we are still in the same house, but the 2-day generous application sage cleansing did the trick. He's no longer around." If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, and feel free to watch more on my channel. I have a lot more content.